At my 10-year anniversary, Mom arrived in black and toasted my brother, until my husband's cousin asked, "You mean the one jailed last Christmas?" My brother Ethan has deliberately ruined all of my life's milestones. Our mother stood there, making excuses for her beloved newborn boy's occasional overexcitement. My high school graduation, he arrived intoxicated and threw up in the parking lot when I was walking to obtain my diploma. So instead of looking at me, everyone was watching him. Mom explained that he was merely concerned about his own future, and we needed to be understanding. My college acceptance celebration dinner, he declared that college was a hoax and that I was wasting everyone's money. Then he stormed out, leaving me crying in the restaurant. Mom followed him to ensure he was safe and never returned. When I started my first professional work, Ethan spent the entire family meal outlining why my career choice was foolish and that I'd surely be fired within a month. Mom smiled and said he was only jealous that I was growing up so quickly, leaving him behind. Every birthday, Ethan would arrive late to ensure he was the center of attention, and he would throw a fit if anyone spoke to me for too long. On my 21st birthday, he feigned to have a panic attack because I received more gifts than him. Mom insisted everyone stop celebrating to console him, and we didn't even cut the cake. My college graduation, he brought his new girlfriend, whom he had been dating for 3 days, and proposed to her during my celebration. Everyone spent the remainder of the night congratulating them, leaving me alone in my cap and gown. Mom thought it was wonderful that he wanted to share such an important event with the family. When I got engaged, Ethan informed my fiancée that I had been in love with someone else just before we met, and was probably settling. Then he spent weeks calling my fiancé, telling him made-up lies about my previous relationships. Mom remarked, "Boys will be boys," and he was simply being protective. At my wedding, Ethan gave a 30-minute best man speech, despite the fact that he wasn't the best man, in which he told embarrassing fictional anecdotes about my childhood and ended by declaring he gave the marriage 2 years at most. This pattern lasted for 28 years. Ethan wrecked everything, including my work promotions, baby shower, and housewarming celebration. He'd either make a disturbance, pretend there was an emergency, or invent a victim to draw attention to himself. Mom excused every single occurrence by saying Ethan was struggling, stressed, or simply expressing himself differently. She'd tell me I was the strong one who didn't require as much attention, and I should be pleased that I was stable enough to help my brother through his issues. Now I'm organizing a 10-year anniversary celebration. My husband and I saved for 3 years to throw a wonderful party for all of our friends and family at a lovely venue. We invited everyone except Ethan 2 months ago. When Mom received hers, she immediately called and demanded to know where Ethan's invitation was. I told her he was not invited because he has destroyed every big event in my life, and I wanted one special day free of his drama. She completely lost it, accusing me of being nasty and vindictive, and insisting that family always supports family. She threatened not to go if Ethan was not invited. I stood firm and said that was her decision, but Ethan was not welcome. She has cried about how this will destroy Ethan. She's furious at how selfish I am. She's attempted guilt, stating Dad would be disappointed in me if he were still alive. The party occurred last Saturday. I was worried Mom would bring Ethan anyway, but she arrived alone in all black, like if she were attending a funeral. She spent the cocktail hour telling everyone who would listen that Ethan was excluded from his own sister's celebration, which broke her heart. Mom stepped up during dinner's toast time, despite the fact that she wasn't supposed to speak. She clinked her glass, indicating that she had something important to communicate. She began discussing family, forgiveness, and how some individuals harbor grudges over minor disagreements. She was going to give a huge speech about Ethan when my husband's cousin Hannah interjected. "Excuse me. Are you referring to Ethan, who was not a jailed at Christmas misunderstanding? That was an assault. For hitting his stepfather? Because." Mom attempted to deflect, but my buddy Claire piped up. "Wait, is this the same Ethan who took money from the memorial fund when your father died? I remember you crying about that for weeks." More individuals joined in. My coworker mentioned that Ethan had shown up intoxicated to work and gotten me written up. My husband's brother mentioned Ethan called him before our wedding to attempt to convince him I was unfaithful. My aunt mentioned how Ethan faked cancer to garner attention throughout my pregnancy. Every single individual had an Ethan tale, and Mom stood there stunned as 15 years of enabling were revealed in front of everyone. But the big shock came when my cousin Rachel stepped up and the entire room fell silent because everyone knew she was going to say something significant. Rachel looked straight at Mom and stated she needed to tell everyone what truly happened at Ethan's last intervention 4 years ago, which the family tried to conceal. Mom's face turned white, and she opened her mouth. But Rachel kept talking. She claimed Ethan didn't just show up intoxicated to the intervention. When faced with evidence that he had stolen money from many family members, he attacked our Uncle George. Mom paid Uncle George's medical bills and had everyone pledge not to discuss it to protect Ethan's reputation. I felt my stomach plummet since I knew nothing about all of this. Rachel's voice rose as she explained that she had only been silent before because Mom had begged her to think of Ethan's future. However, seeing Mom wear black to my party and attempt to guilt everyone altered Rachel's opinion about keeping family secrets. Another cousin I barely knew stood up from the back of the room and told me that Ethan took $4,500 from him 2 years ago, claiming money was for treatment, but he saw him at a casino the next week. Mom was aware of the situation and advised the cousin to be patient as Ethan struggled. My aunt moved her chair back, revealing that Ethan had shown up at her house last Christmas demanding money. When she declined, he removed the jewelry from her bedroom. Mom gently returned the jewelry and advised my aunt not to seek charges since they would destroy Ethan. The stories continued arriving, and they followed the same pattern. Ethan does something horrific. Mother conceals it and makes excuses, while everyone else is expected to remain silent to protect him. My spouse gripped my hand under the table, and I realized how far the enabling had gone. Mom has been covering crimes, thefts, and assaults for many years. Mom attempted to speak, but her voice came out as a strange croak with nothing further following. She looked around the room at everyone who was stating the truth about Ethan, and she couldn't spin it or make excuses since there were so many witnesses all saying the same thing. Hannah stood up again, saying she needed to add something essential. Ethan's arrest for Christmas was not his first. It was his second incarceration in 2 years, and Mother had been bailing him out while keeping the situation hidden from the rest of the family. My husband's best buddy cleared his throat and added that Ethan called him 6 months earlier and tried to borrow money under my name, stating I was in financial problems but too proud to ask. When he called to check on me, he realized Ethan was operating a scam based on my reputation. I got my voice and asked Mom openly how much money she had given Ethan over the years. She didn't respond and simply stared at her plate. However, my aunt stated that she was aware that Mom had taken out a second mortgage on the house to pay off Ethan's obligations. The figure had to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars at this time. Mom stepped up and said, "I did what any mother would do to protect her child." Her voice shook. But Rachel stopped her before she could continue and said no. A true mother would have let Ethan face the consequences rather than allowing him to harm more people. The group screamed in agreement and shared many more stories I'd never heard. My coworker stood forward and recounted the day Ethan arrived at my company so inebriated that I was written up for the disruption. She elaborated. Mom actually called my boss afterward to make excuses for Ethan instead of apologizing to me for what happened. Another person recounted Ethan stealing from their car during a family cookout. Someone else mentioned Ethan spreading lies about them to their job. Every single individual had been hurt by Ethan in some way, and Mom had either hushed it up, downplayed it, or made them feel awful for being upset. Mom rose up quickly and declared that she was leaving because she would not stay anywhere where her kid was attacked by people who did not understand his situation. She snatched her purse from the back of her chair and took rapid, angry strides toward the door. I stood up too, and my legs were unsteady. But I managed to remark that if she left now, she's choosing Ethan over me one final time, and I'll know exactly where I stand. She halted at the door, hand on the doorknob, but did not turn around to face me. My husband approached Mom and told her calmly but firmly that she had harmed me for 28 years, and tonight was supposed to be about celebrating our marriage, not her guilt over Ethan. He asked her to simply leave if she couldn't be pleased for us. Mom turned around, tears flowing down her cheeks, and said, "I've always been the strong one who didn't need her as much as Ethan did." Rachel laughed, but it sounded bitter and harsh, and she continued, "That's exactly the problem. Mother produced a monster by treating me as if I didn't exist." Mom glanced at Rachel as if she had been slapped, then turned to walk out the door. The room went utterly silent for what seemed like an eternity. Nobody moved, spoke, or appeared to breathe. Then my husband's mother stepped up, raised her glass, and proposed a toast to me saying, "I deserve to be celebrated without drama for once in my life." Other people began to raise their glasses, and the tension in the room eased slightly. The party gradually recovered over the following hour, and individuals approached me one by one to apologize for keeping silent about Ethan for so long. They all expressed basically the same thing. They had no idea how horrible it was until they heard everyone else's stories tonight. My aunt held me, cried, and apologized for not protecting me better. Rachel walked up and said she should have spoken out years ago, but she was frightened of causing family problems. I assured everyone I understood, and I was relieved they had finally told the truth. Despite the initial stress, my husband and I had a lovely evening. We danced, laughed, and celebrated among individuals who genuinely cared about us. I felt lighter than I had in years, as if a big weight had been removed from my shoulders. For the first time, I didn't feel weird for being upset about Ethan's behavior because everyone confirmed that it was genuine and terrible, not just me being sensitive or carrying grudges. The following morning, I awoke to 40 text messages from various family members. My phone kept vibrating on the nightstand, so I finally picked it up to check. Some responses were encouraging, emphasizing how proud they were of me for standing up to Mom. Some were upset with me for embarrassing Mother in front of everyone at what was supposed to be a celebration. Some were wondering what was going on with the family, and if there would be a meeting to discuss matters. I did not respond to any of them immediately away because I wanted time to comprehend what had transpired. Around lunchtime, I finally began going through the messages, and the most of them were encouraging. But then I got the one from my mother. She sent it at 3 a.m., so she must have spent the night stewing over what transpired at the party. The text was long and meandering, and it read, "I humiliated her in front of everyone. She couldn't believe I allowed people criticize Ethan when he wasn't even present to defend himself. She went on about how families are meant to defend one another, yet I turned everyone against my own brother." There was nothing in the message regarding Rachel's intervention story, the theft, the arrests, or anything else anyone had stated about Ethan. She continued saying I embarrassed her and made her look like a poor mother, despite the fact that all she did was try to help both of her children. I read it 3 times, and each time I became angrier because she still didn't understand it. She was playing the victim again, like she often did with Ethan. I sat there for about 20 minutes trying to figure out what to say back since part of me wanted to make a lengthy answer explaining everything. But then I understood she wouldn't hear it anyhow. So I just typed back that I didn't allow anyone to attack Ethan. I allow individuals to tell the truth. And if the truth made her appear awful, perhaps she should think about it. I pressed send and put my phone down. And my hubby inquired whether I was all right. I told him I was done trying to make my mother understand since she would never admit what she had done wrong. She didn't react to my text, which was probably a good thing because I didn't have the energy for another battle. Megan called at 2 p.m. and seemed nervous when I answered. She immediately apologized for ditching the intervention narrative without informing me first. I could hear her voice cracking slightly, and she claimed she had planned to be silent, but seeing my mother try to manipulate everyone at the party made her so upset she couldn't hold it in any longer. She spoke quickly, stating that she had felt horrible for years for hiding that secret, and seeing my mother wear black to my celebration as if she were grieving pushed her over the brink. I told Megan she didn't have to apologize because what she did was bold, and I was glad someone spoke up. She began crying on the phone, saying she should have done it years ago rather than allowing my mother to guilt her into silence. We chatted for about an hour about all the times Ethan harmed others and my mother covered it up. Megan explained that she had been in treatment dealing with family issues, and her therapist had helped her see how wrong it was to continue shielding Ethan. We both felt better by the end of the call, and Megan expressed her relief that the truth had finally been revealed, even if it was messy. My aunt called me that evening and said she needed to tell me something she didn't want to discuss at the party. Her voice was exhausted and sorrowful as she stated that Ethan had been stealing prescription medicines from her medical cabinet during family gatherings for at least 5 years. She saw medicines going missing after holidays and birthdays, but she initially refused to accept it was Ethan. Then she discovered him coming out of her restroom one Christmas with his pockets full, and she confronted him. Ethan cried, saying he had a problem and asked her not to tell anyone. My aunt made him pledge to seek therapy, and she assumed that was the end of it. However, the tablets continued to disappear at subsequent family gatherings. When she told my mother about it, she stated it was just a phase and Ethan will outgrow it. My aunt was crying by this point, claiming she was sorry she hadn't done more to stop him. She felt horrible for not calling the cops or forcing him into therapy. I told her it wasn't her fault because my mother misled everyone into believing they were helping Ethan by being silent. After we hung up, I sat there, sick to my stomach. My chat with my aunt shifted something in my mind, and I began to perceive the entire pattern differently. My mother had not only been making excuses for Ethan's terrible behavior during parties and family gatherings. She had been deliberately concealing illegal conduct and deceiving everyone about how serious his troubles were. The stealing, the drugs, the violence, the arrests. It was all much worse than anyone realized because my mother spent years hiding the reality. She paid people off and made them promise not to talk, telling everyone that all Ethan needed was more support and understanding. But she was basically sheltering him from any penalties and allowing him to continue abusing people. The betrayal felt even deeper now, since it wasn't simply that she preferred Ethan over me. She had been putting the entire family at risk by aiding an addict and a thief while pretending everything was normal. I felt angry, sad, and perplexed all at once. Part of me wanted to contact her and shout about what my aunt had told me, but I knew it wouldn't alter anything. 4 days passed and I hadn't heard from Ethan, which made me even more concerned than if he had called straight away. Then, on Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was him. I almost didn't respond, but something made me pick up, and he instantly began shouting at me. His voice was so loud that I had to keep the phone away from my ear, and he was ranting about how I turned everyone against him and wrecked his relationship with his family. He called me nasty names and accused me of lying, as well as everyone else at the party. He went on and on about how he never committed any of the things people accused him of, and that everything was exaggerated or misinterpreted. He made no apologies or even acknowledged that some of the stories might be accurate. He basically shouted about being cast as the villain and how unfair it was that I had barred him from the celebration. I could hear him breathing heavily in between phrases and wondered if he was intoxicated, high, or simply angry. He kept saying that I was out to destroy him and set the entire family against him because I was jealous of the attention he received from our mother. I let Ethan rant for approximately 5 minutes before saying anything since I was curious what he would say if I wasn't fighting back. He ultimately ran out of energy, and there was a gap in which he simply breathed into the phone. Then I talked calmly, telling him that he had damaged his own relationships by being selfish and destructive for 28 years. And I said I was done shielding him from the repercussions of his own actions, and I didn't care if he was angry with me for telling the truth. My voice did not shake at all, despite the fact that my hands shook as I held the phone. I told him that every story recounted during the party was real, and he knew it. Then I remarked that while I hoped he got assistance, I was no longer going to be a part of his life. He started ranting again, but I hung up in the middle of his statement. My husband was sitting next to me on the couch, and he grabbed and gripped my hand. I felt strangely tranquil after the call ended, as if I had finally spoken what I needed to say to Ethan. About an hour later, my phone began to vibrate with text messages from Ethan. The first one stated he was going to come to my house and make me confess to our mother for what I had done. The second one warned, "You better watch your back," because he knew where I lived. The texts continued to arrive, each one more menacing than the last. He said he was going to show up at my workplace and tell everyone what a bad person I was. He claimed he would make sure I regretted leaving him out of the celebration. My husband's expression became serious as he peeked over my shoulder at the texts. He urged me to stop reading them, then snatched my phone and began taking screenshots of every message Ethan sent. There were only about 12 texts in total, and some of them were so frightening that my husband thought we needed to file a police report immediately. I didn't want to at first because I feared it would exacerbate the situation, but my husband insisted that we protect ourselves because Ethan was making direct threats. We traveled to the police station that evening and spoke with an officer at the front desk. My husband showed him screenshots of Ethan's communications and added that Ethan had also called earlier to make threats. The police took us seriously straight away, which shocked me because I expected them to dismiss it as a family fight. He had us write out a report and inquired about Ethan's background and whether he had ever been violent. The cop searched up Hannah's Christmas arrest in the system after I mentioned it at the party. When he viewed Ethan's record, his face altered, and he revealed that Ethan had been arrested twice in the previous 2 years for violence and theft. The police stated they'd call Ethan and issue him an official warning to stay away from us or risk harassing charges. He also recommended that if Ethan continued, we might consider filing a restraining order. My husband thanked him and we left the station feeling a little safer, but still concerned about how Ethan might respond if the police became involved. The police called the next morning to say they had contacted Ethan and issued him a warning. He claimed Ethan became enraged on the phone with them but promised to stay away from us. The police instructed us to contact immediately if Ethan arrived at our home or workplace, or if he sent any further threatening messages. I was happy that the cops took it seriously, but I also felt awful for getting Ethan into trouble with the law again. That remorse lasted approximately 2 hours, until my mother called me screaming. She was so loud and angry that I couldn't hear what she was saying at first. Then I realized mother was angry at me for getting the police involved in Ethan's case. She claimed I was attempting to destroy him and put him in jail. She kept repeating, "How could I do this to my own brother, and did I not care that he might end up with a criminal record?" I wanted to laugh because Ethan already had one, but she kept pretending he didn't. I interrupted her and explained that Ethan had damaged himself by threatening me, and that I was now only safeguarding my own peace and safety. She began to cry and scream I was ripping the family apart. I informed her that after 28 years of her enabling, the family had already broken apart, and I was tired of being the one who suffered to keep everyone else comfortable. Then I hung up on her because I couldn't take any more excuses. Over the next few days, my phone was constantly vibrating with texts from various family members. My aunt wrote a long message saying she was proud of me for finally standing up to mom and that she had been waiting for someone to do so for years. Rachel texted that half of the family had called her after the party to express their relief that someone had finally spoken the truth about Ethan. My husband's brother apologized for not speaking out sooner and expressed respect for how I handled everything. Hannah texted that her parents had been discussing mom's enabling for decades, but no one wanted to cause family conflict by tackling it. Even a co-worker from the party contacted me to say she had no idea how bad things were, and she now understands why I sounded concerned whenever family occasions occurred. Each message made me feel a bit less alone in realizing how messed up the situation was. I had spent so many years wondering if I was the problem or if I was being overly sensitive to Ethan's conduct. But now I had evidence from 12 separate people that what occurred to me was real and terrible, and I shouldn't have just accepted it. My husband read over some of the notes with me and commented that it was encouraging that people were now being honest, rather than pretending everything was fine. That evening, we sat down at the kitchen table with our laptops, and agreed we needed to write down exactly what limits we were establishing with my family going forward. We spent 2 hours typing out a document outlining specific behaviors we would no longer tolerate, and the repercussions if those limits were violated. We stated that Ethan was not welcome at our home or any of the activities we organized, and that anyone who attempted to bring him would be asked to leave. We stated that we would not attend any family gatherings where Ethan was present, and that we would not discuss or make excuses for avoiding him. We wrote that mom needed to stop trying to guilt us or defend Ethan's conduct, and that if she continued, we would limit our contact with her. We stated that we expected fundamental respect for our decisions, and that family members who were unable to offer it would be excluded from our life. My husband suggested we include a statement about not accepting last-minute guilt trips or manipulation methods, which I felt was crucial. We read it 3 times to ensure that it was clear and firm without being nasty or aggressive. Then we sent it as an email to both my mother and Ethan with the subject line, "Family boundaries going forward." I was terrified to click send because I knew it would trigger another outburst. However, my husband reminded me that we had every right to protect ourselves and our quiet. My mother's reaction arrived within an hour and was just what I expected. She wrote that I was being unkind and unfair, and that family members are expected to forgive and support one another regardless. She claimed I was harboring grudges for things Ethan didn't even remember doing, and that I was punishing him for having a worse life than I did. She stated that Dad would be very sad to see me breaking the family apart over minor conflicts and damaged feelings. She stated that genuine love entails accepting people's shortcomings and assisting them through their difficulties, rather than abandoning them when they are at their most vulnerable. She didn't admit any particular actions Ethan had taken, or how she had enabled his behavior. She made no apologies for wearing black to my gathering or attempting to guilt everyone in her speech. She kept telling me that I was bad for setting boundaries and that I should be the larger person and let go of everything. When I presented the email to my husband, he shook his head and claimed she would never accept genuine responsibility for anything. That's when I understood he was correct, and I had to accept that my mother would probably never admit the harm she'd done or understand why her favoritism affected me so much. I scheduled an appointment with my therapist for the following week because I knew I needed help processing my sadness at not having the mother I deserved. I cried during the session, talking about how I had always hoped that one day Mom would recognize what she had done and apologize, allowing us to have a meaningful connection. My therapist helped me see that I was grieving the loss of a fantasy relationship that never existed, and that embracing reality was difficult but vital for moving on. She stated I could grieve what I didn't get while still protecting myself from additional hurt, and the two were not incompatible. 4 weeks after the party, I was at work, finishing up some paperwork. when the receptionist contacted my extension and said there was someone in the lobby looking for me. I came out to the waiting area and stopped when I noticed Ethan standing there, angry and agitated. He began ranting about how I had ruined his life and set everyone against him, and I needed to solve it right away. I backed up and told him he had to leave immediately since he wasn't supposed to contact me. He approached me and said he wouldn't go until I contacted Mom and apologized for everything. Our security man heard the noise and approached to see if there was an issue. I told him that this man was making threats and that he needed to leave the building. Ethan began yelling louder, claiming I was a liar and that he just wanted to talk to his sister. The security guy asked for assistance, and 2 more guards arrived to lead Ethan out while he yelled about how I was killing his family. My hands were shaking as I returned to my office and contacted my spouse. He left work immediately and met me at the police station, where we filed another report about Ethan breaching the warning they had issued him. The officer who took the report stated it was sufficient for a restraining order and assisted us in filling out the paperwork immediately away. He stated that the judge would evaluate it within 48 hours, and Ethan would be served with the order as soon as it was authorized. I felt safer knowing there might be legal penalties if Ethan approached me again. But I was also fatigued from dealing with all of this. My mother called that evening, and I knew before I answered that she would blame me for what had occurred. She was screaming and yelling at the same time, stating that I was tearing the family apart and ruining Ethan's life for nothing. I interrupted her and told her that Ethan tore the family apart 28 years ago when he began destroying every milestone in my life, and she assisted him by never holding him accountable for anything. She stated I was being emotional, that Ethan simply made some mistakes, like everyone does. I explained that showing up at work and refusing to go was not a mistake. It was harassment, and I was done pretending that his actions were okay. I hung up before she could say anything else. 4 days later, Rachel called and asked if I wanted to attend a family event she was planning at her house that weekend. She stated that she had invited roughly 12 relatives, but explicitly did not invite Mom or Ethan since individuals needed a safe area to speak openly without fear of judgment. I asked my husband if he wanted to go and he replied yes because it sounded like just what we needed. That Saturday we traveled to Rachel's house and I was surprised at how many people turned there. My aunt was there with her husband and their adult children. Hannah arrived with her parents. Several cousins whom I hadn't seen in months were sitting in the living room. Rachel had prepared food and drinks, and the atmosphere was comfortable in a way that family reunions rarely are. We spent the first hour catching up and talking about everyday stuff, but Rachel recommended we walk around and relate how we'd been affected by familial dysfunction. My aunt spoke first, explaining how Mom's partiality for Ethan had made her feel as if her own children were unimportant to their grandma. Hannah's mother said that she had been in treatment for 5 years, working with the pain of seeing her sister assist Ethan's increasingly deadly behavior. One of my relatives stated that he stopped attending family functions 4 years ago because Ethan stole money from him. And Mom supported Ethan, saying he was simply going through a difficult time. Another cousin stated that she had also been seeing a therapist and had learned that the family dynamic was emotionally harmful and that she no longer had to accept it. Person after person related stories about how Ethan's actions and Mom's enabling had harmed them and how they'd all suffered in silence, believing they were alone. I began crying as I realized how many others had had similar experiences to mine, and how we'd all been isolated from one another by the unspoken rule that we couldn't discuss Ethan's difficulties. My husband held my hand and told me that this was what a healthy family looked like. Individuals who were honest and supportive of one another rather than protecting one person at the expense of the others. My aunt suggested we start a group chat sans Mom and Ethan to stay connected and be open about our experiences. Everyone agreed right away, and within minutes, we had a group chat with 12 people. The energy in the room felt lighter after that, as if we'd all been carrying the same heavy secret and had now laid it down together. 4 weeks after the party, I was checking my email before bed when I noticed a message from my mother with the subject line, "I've been thinking." My heart skipped a beat because I suspected she was finally ready to admit her mistakes and accept full responsibility. I opened the email and began reading, hoping that this would be the tipping point where we might begin to restore our relationship. The email began with her claiming she'd been thinking a lot about what happened at the party. She replied that she understood how unhappy I was, but she wanted me to know that she had always done her best as a mother and could not control Ethan's decisions or difficulties. She claimed having 2 children was difficult, and she tried to be fair to both of us, even though Ethan needed more assistance and attention because he struggled more than I did. She said that she'd forgiven me for embarrassing her in front of the entire family and hoped we could get through this difficult period. She concluded by saying, "Family is forever, and she loved me no matter what. I read it 3 times, hoping I had overlooked something, but it was precisely what I expected. More justifications regarding Ethan's need for assistance. More explanations for trying her best. No true recognition of how her bias harmed me for 28 years. There was no apology for allowing Ethan's bad behavior or covering up his misdeeds. She just forgave me like if I had done something wrong. I shut the laptop and sat there, feeling dumb expecting she had changed. My spouse entered the bedroom and asked if I was okay because I appeared disturbed. I showed him the email, which he read quietly. Then he asked what I intended to do about it. I spent the next hour composing a response, then deleting it and writing again. Finally, I responded by email, stating that I did not need her forgiveness because I had done nothing wrong. I stated that banning Ethan from my celebration was a good limit after 28 years of him wrecking my cherished occasions. I informed her that I needed to be away from her until she could truly accept the pain she created by enabling Ethan and treating me as if my feelings didn't matter. I told her I loved her, but I couldn't be in a relationship with someone who refused to accept responsibility for the harm they caused. It was the most difficult email I had ever sent, and my hands shook when I clicked send. My husband held me while I sobbed because a part of me still wanted my mother to be the person I needed her to be. The next morning, he reminded me that having boundaries does not make me a terrible daughter. He stated it makes me a healthy adult who will no longer tolerate mistreatment. He told me he was proud of me for finally standing up for myself, despite how frightening and terrible it was. His support helped me stay strong when I began to feel bad about the email. I passed several weeks without hearing from my mother or Ethan. The silence felt strange at first because I was accustomed to non-stop drama and crisis calls regarding Ethan. However, the silence eventually became pleasant. I realized how much energy I'd expended attempting to control their dysfunction and make everyone pleased. Without the weight, I felt lighter. I began sleeping better. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes, expecting the next Ethan emergency. The stillness was actually very pleasant. I concentrated on strengthening relationships with the family members who came out for me during the party. Rachel then hosted another dinner at her place, and this time, even more relatives attended. We scheduled regular dinners and established new rituals that did not include walking on eggshells due to Ethan's conduct. My aunt arranged a cookout, and no one mentioned Ethan or my mother throughout the event. We simply enjoyed each other's company and talked about typical topics. It felt like family gatherings should have always been like this. I also started visiting a therapist to sort through everything. My therapist helped me grasp the complex sadness of losing my mother while she was still living. She stated that I was mourning the relationship I desired and deserved, not the one I actually had. She suggested it was normal to mourn the loss even though my mother was still alive. The therapy sessions helped me accept my mother for who she is, rather than who I wish she was. It was hard work, but I felt stronger every week. Rachel called one afternoon and told me something unusual. She stated that after witnessing me setting boundaries with my mother, other family members began to do the same. My aunt informed my mother that she would not attend any parties where Ethan was present. When she tried to guilt them over Ethan, 2 cousins stopped answering her calls. Rachel explained that my mother was beginning to see that her enabling had lost her relationships with many others, not just me. Hearing this made me feel less alone in my decision. A few weeks later, I received a card in the mail for my birthday. It came from my mother, with a generic greeting wishing me happiness and a check for $45. There was no acknowledgement of our conflict or genuine attempt to mend the relationship. Only surface-level gestures as if nothing had occurred. The card seemed empty and pointless. I presented it to my spouse and asked his opinion on what I should do. He advised me to decide what type of contact I was comfortable with and keep to that boundaries. I chose not to pay the check or react to the card because I did not want to convey conflicting messages about my limits. Accepting the money or thanking her would make it appear as if everything was okay, which it was not. My husband fully supported this decision. He reminded me that I get to choose what contact works best for me, and I don't owe anyone an explanation. Rachel contacted about a week after my birthday to share some news. Ethan had been detained again, this time for stealing from a store. She stated my mother tried to bail him out as usual, but she couldn't because she had run out of money. Apparently, all those years of paying Ethan's debts and legal fees had depleted her savings. Rachel told me that my mother was now admitting that her enabling did not benefit Ethan at all. It only delayed the repercussions and exacerbated his difficulties. Hearing it made me sad but mostly relieved that it was no longer my problem. That same week my spouse reminded me that our anniversary was coming up on Thursday. we decided to forego any huge celebrations after what occurred at the party and just stay at home together. He ordered takeout from the Italian restaurant where we had our first date, and we ate on the couch while watching classic movies. We discussed the party and how bad the drama was, but also how it eventually brought things out in the open. He stated he was pleased of me for maintaining my limits, even when it was difficult. I told him I couldn't have done any of this without his help. We all agreed that having healthier family boundaries was worth the friction and stress. It felt lovely to simply be together, without any chaos or manipulation. Later that night, my aunt texted me, claiming she wanted to tell me something. She commented that seeing me reject Ethan and stand up to my mother gave her the confidence to confront her own poisonous family situation with her sister. She admitted that she had been making excuses for her sister's behavior for years, just as my mother had done with Ethan. Seeing me finally say, enough was enough, pushed her to establish her own boundaries. She thanked me for demonstrating that it was possible to love family members while protecting yourself from their damage. Reading that message made me cry because I never imagined my decision would benefit anyone else. It felt good to know that something constructive had come out of the argument. I went 4 weeks without hearing from my mother. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was her. She asked if we could meet for coffee and speak. I said I'd think about it and call her back. I asked my husband if I should go, and he replied it was my decision, but he suggested I bring him along for support. I contacted my mother back the next day and said I'd meet her, but my husband would accompany me, and I was only willing to chat if she was ready for an honest conversation. She agreed, and we scheduled an appointment for Saturday morning at a coffee shop near our house. When Saturday arrived, my husband drove us to the coffee shop and we walked inside together. My mother was already seated at a corner table, with 3 cups of coffee ready. We sat down, and she immediately began talking about how difficult things had been with Ethan, and how she has been doing a lot of reflecting. I interrupted her and asked her to stop and listen for a minute without defending or making excuses. She became quiet and folded her hands on the table. I told her that her favoritism and enabling had a long-term negative impact on me, which I am now dealing through in therapy. I stated that every time Ethan wrecked something essential, she made excuses for him. She taught me that my feelings were unimportant, and my successes were not worth protecting. I explained that seeing her wear black to my anniversary party as if she were mourning rather than celebrating revealed where I was in her priorities. My spouse reached over and squeezed my hand as I spoke. My mother burst into tears, saying she never meant to upset me. She explained that she was only trying to help Ethan because he always appeared to need it more than I did. I informed her that intent does not eliminate impact, and that her decisions had actual implications for me, even if she didn't intend them to. She dried her eyes with a tissue and admitted she could see how Ethan exploited her. She stated that it was simpler to give in to his demands and hide his difficulties than to set boundaries and make him confront the consequences. She admitted that her enabling had a negative impact on everyone, even Ethan. It wasn't a comprehensive acknowledgement of everything she'd done, but it was the closest she'd ever come to accepting responsibility. I told her I was willing to work on mending our connection, but it would be slow and required her to respect my boundaries around Ethan. I told her she needs to stop making excuses for his conduct and expecting me to give up my serenity to accommodate him. She nodded and said she'd try. I made it plain that just trying wasn't enough. I needed to see real change over time. My husband noted that while we appreciated her willingness to work on problems, trust had to be re-established by regular behaviors. My mother agreed, and we finished our coffee discussing benign things like the weather and her garden. Over the next 3 weeks, my mother contacted me twice, and both times she was able to talk to me without mentioning or justifying Ethan. She inquired about my work and my husband's family and truly listened to my responses. When I said that Ethan's name had come up in a family group chat, she did not offer excuses or try to make me feel bad. The progress was sluggish and occasionally difficult, but it was something. She gave me a card with no purpose other than to say she was thinking about me. Small gestures indicating that she was making an effort, even if it was not flawless. I came to understand that I might never receive the full apology and accountability I deserved from my mother. She may never fully comprehend how deeply her decisions harmed me or accept complete responsibility for the harm she caused. My therapist helped me realize that my healing no longer relied on my mother's attention. I could either move forward and create a healthier relationship with realistic expectations, or I could continue to wait for something that may never come. In any case, I did not need her approval to be at ease. Ethan does not try to contact me again after the restraining order is filed. I hear from Rachel and other family members that he is now in court-ordered therapy and is actually attending his sessions because the judge told him he would go to jail if he missed any of them. He appears to be facing charges for theft, harassment, and a variety of other offenses that have now caught up to him. I don't pay close attention to his situation because, frankly, it's no longer my problem, and keeping him out of my mind feels better than knowing every aspect of his disaster. The restraining order remains in effect, and I make sure to renew it when the time comes because I don't want to risk him suddenly being a different person. My spouse never suggested that I give Ethan another chance, or try to forgive and move on from anything. He never mentions that family is family, and that I should try to reconcile. Instead, he asks me how I'm doing, and if I need anything, and he reminds me that I get to choose who gets room in my life. When I feel guilty about the restraining order or question if I'm being too severe, he sits with me and goes over specific things Ethan did over the years to help me remember why I took these decisions. He never makes me feel weak because I have complex thoughts regarding my family. And he never forces me to feel differently than I do. About 4 weeks after the anniversary party, we're sitting on the couch watching TV when he reaches over and touches my hand. He tells me he is happy of how I stuck up for myself and set limits, even when it was difficult. He claims that observing me choose my personal peace over people-pleasing taught him what true strength looks like. I begin to cry since no one has ever been proud of me for defending myself before. And I realize how much his support has transformed my entire life. He's taught me what healthy family connections should be like by never questioning my worth or safety. Rachel's planned extended family gathering becomes a recurring event. We begin meeting once a month at various people's homes, and it becomes a ritual in which we can all be honest without fear of hurting Ethan's feelings or walking on eggshells around my mother's enabling. At the second gathering, my aunt says she wishes we had done this years ago instead of suffering in quiet. Everyone agrees, and we spend time discussing how the dysfunction affected each of us uniquely. My cousin admits that she stopped attending family gatherings for about 5 years because Ethan's behavior was so unpleasant, and my mother would guilt-trip anyone who complained. Another relative admits they relocated across the nation to escape the controversy. Hearing everyone's tales makes me realize that Ethan's impact extended well beyond simply spoiling my milestones. He poisoned the entire family dynamic, and my mother's complicity made it hard for anyone to feel secure or appreciated. Now we're creating something new based on honesty and mutual respect. We truly enjoy spending time together without the continuous worry of what Ethan will do next, or how my mother would justify it. 7 weeks after the anniversary party, I wake up on a Saturday morning and discover I am actually at peace. I have clear limits with my mother, which she typically follows, even if she doesn't fully understand why they are important. I have supportive relationships with family members that genuinely care about me and do not demand me to put my own needs aside for the sake of others. I can celebrate my life and my accomplishments without Ethan's turmoil ruining everything. My mother and I occasionally talk on the phone and meet for coffee, but our interactions are careful and limited. She may never fully comprehend the pain she inflicted by choosing Ethan over me for 28 years. She may never give me the full apologies and accountability I deserve, but I've realized that my healing is no longer dependent on her acknowledgement. What really matters is that I finally selected myself. And that decision brought me the peace I had been looking for all along. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.